So it moved its way over into the prep area, the cut fit, and I just love it. I honestly love it. I won't. Somebody asked me the other day, like, "Oh, do you put it up there with Tren?" And I know this is not because I bash people for asking questions about Tren all the time. Nothing is Tren. Let's just get that out of the way.
Yeah, it's its own
not,
animal.
Tren's kind of, it's on its own level. But I got to tell you, if someone said, you just can't use, I'm working with Andrew, and Andrew's like, you can't use Tren, anything Tren related. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll tell you, I'll use DHB. I wouldn't cry about it a whole lot, to be honest with you.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Blood, Sweat, and Gear with coaches Skip Hill, Andrew Barry, myself, Scott McNally. And guys, we're brought to you by True Nutrition. TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK over there for high-quality, third-party tested supplements. You can get real cheap carb powder like Carbo Load if you are on a budget, or you can go all the way to Cadillac like Highly Branched Cyclic Dextrin. We're also brought to you by SupplementSource.ca. I saw some All-Max pre-workout on closeout for like 10 freaking bucks. So if you're in Canada, you literally can't beat that. Head on over to SupplementSource.ca. Of course, we're brought to you by Patreon. Thank you guys for all your support over at Patreon. We're going to knock out a real quick Q&A this time around. And of course, we're going to launch with a gear topic. Surprise, surprise. What do you guys think about DHB for a contest prep or just DHB for a cut? Basically, dieting phase on DHB, Dihydroboldenone, a.k.a.
One test sip.
Yeah, that's what it is. Thank you.
Yep. I know a guy, now he's got exceptional genetics, but he used no drugs except for DHB for his contest prep. And as the show got closer, he just added 50 milligrams a week. So maybe he started at like 300 at 15 weeks out, and maybe by 10 weeks out, he's up to 400. And by the end of the show prep, I think he was up to like 600 or 650 a week. So 50 mgs a day or something. And he came in crazy condition, and he won his show. He won, I think, bodybuilding and men's physique, which is kind of funny. And he's also 4 years old. But you walk by him, you're like, there's no way this guy's more than 35. He's got one of those genetic physiques and facial and all that. But in terms of like, is it a go-to in my repertoire for contest prep? Like, no, not unless someone insists that they do really well with it.
Yeah.
We talk about like prep drugs versus off-season drugs. And obviously you can use any compound, at any phase of your bodybuilding journey, whether it's prep or off season or whatever you want to call it. But we do pick certain compounds based off of not just what they do, but the side effects they cause. Right. And I just didn't like, when I've tried DHB several times, I just didn't like personally how I felt on it. I kind of felt chemically, if that's a feeling. It's kind of been it's kind of a compound I've kind of just, yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's kind of one of those compounds I've just put off to the side as like, maybe some people will really, really respond to it. But I think the vast majority of people, we stick with like the mainline things that everyone typically uses. So that's my take on it.
Okay.
I love it. I love it, honestly. I do. I've come to love it.
Yeah.
I think what has happened with me, and it's funny too, because I'm looking at myself in the thing. I have I have this eye thing eye cold going on. It's now in both eyes. And it's funny because you might look and go, God, Skip's really fat. What's going on? His eyes are closed. I am really fat right now. But part of the reason that my eyes are so squinty is because of this. And it's called like culvaritis or something like that. It's some kind of goopy, snotty thing, and you see me wipe my eyes all the time when I get it's getting worse. I have to actually get antibiotics. Anyway,
one of the main side effects of DHB, guys, in case you didn't know.
Exactly. Thanks for bringing me back in. But it just literally hit me as I looked up. I'm like, wow, this looks horrible. But anyway, DHB is one of those things for me that it started in kind of like, if you have your two groups, I have to come in like this, off season and prep, it like started over here. Yeah. But then it like slowly kind of came to the middle, kind of like everybody's done with Tren for 12 years. It's like, it's a prep drug. No, we can take it 24/7, 53 days of the year. And if anybody responds with, does this dumbass not know that there's 52 weeks in a year? I'm making a point by saying that. So anyway, DHB started in this group, and it kind of just started kind of moving over kind of slow. Got in the middle, and it's like, I could do both. So Skip's like, oh, I'll use it for both. And then, because that's when I talk to myself and I have conversations with myself, that's how I hear myself talk, just so that you in that high-pitched voice. So then it just kind of went into, okay, now I'm going to use it for cut phase. I mean, I like it. It's one of those few compounds that I can actually go, wow, it's not like Anavar, but I'm like, wow, I can like really feel, like I can feel this in the gym. And which is funny because it's a very long ester.
Did you get it quick? Because my thing was... I
don't get it quick.
Okay, because it takes me like 6 weeks to feel like I'm getting anything from it.
Yeah, well, it doesn't take me that long, but all of a sudden when it hits, it hits. If that makes any sense. So it's right up there with chemically. Point is, what is communication? As long as the person you're communicating with understands, we don't need to be so pedantic. I'm going to be anyway, but we don't need to be. Anyway, it's all about understanding communication, and we all understood. So it moved its way over into the prep area, the cut fit, and I just fucking love it. I honestly love it. I won't. Somebody asked me the other day, like, "Oh, do you put it up there with Tren?" And I know this is not because I bash people for asking questions about Tren all the time. Nothing is Tren. Let's just get that out of the way. It's not, animal. Tren's kind of, it's on its own level. But I got to tell you, if someone said, you just can't use, I'm working with Andrew, and Andrew's like, you can't use Tren, anything Tren related. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll tell you, I'll use DHB. I wouldn't cry about it a whole lot, to be honest with you. I'd rather use Tren, acetate, because I think the rest of them suck horribly bad for me.
Yeah.
But I love this stuff. I do have to wonder one thing. Not a depressive individual throughout my 54 years of life, whether on cycle, off cycle, anything else. I have wondered, God, I wonder if there's some mood type of thing on it. There could be. It's one of the few compounds that I have questioned that. But strictly from how I respond to it, in the gym, dieting, conditioning, I love the stuff. And a couple very high level people. See, when I used to say stuff about Phil Heath, I would give out, I was talking about Phil, but I wouldn't say Phil. This time I'm not going to do that. But a couple high level people have approached me and asked me, and I just tell them what I think about it. And then they went to you and they're like,
there was a couple.
I wasn't going to use it, but I do like it.
There was somebody who was coaching a couple guys in this is a few years ago, in the top 10 Olympia, and the two guys decided they weren't going to use Tren. They didn't like the side effects. They used DHB instead. And I had talked to the coach about that time. I want to get an update because I'm curious to know now, with 2 years of hindsight, what that coach and those two athletes thought about it.
Coaches? Well, let me ask, was that coach, because you said he had two athletes in the top 10, was that Hani with...
No.
Okay, because then he might be onto something there if that's what you're saying. But.
Yeah. No, it wasn't. I was going to say, though, I was going to ask, dosing-wise, Skip, do you find... So this is a reduced, basically the way testosterone reverses to DHT. This is DHB, dihydroboldenone. This is the reduced version of equipoise. Do you dose it anywhere in the way you would dose equipoise? Is there any relationship?
For me, it's not very far off. I would run more EQ than I do DHB. Here's the funny thing. I've been in and around, the bodybuilding industry for a long time, and I don't usually get caught up in things people say because I'm like, no. Especially if I haven't seen it with my own experience. So I will tell you this. Every now and then something will stick with me. When people say that DHB is just horrific on kidney values, I have not seen that. I go on record. I've said it before. I've gone on record and I've said that. But in the back of my mind, I just think with some things, I'm like, I don't want to be wrong. I don't want it to hit me. So I don't go. It's not a compound that I go real big on. And you know what? I don't go real big on long estered stuff anyway. I tend to go a little bigger on the shorter ends, which is funny because anybody listening might be calling me out right now, going, "Oh, he doesn't like long ester." I hear him say that all the time. So why does he like EQ? Why does he like DHB? He's contradicted himself. He's such an asshole. He's so old. He's so fat. And where's his tan? Anyway, I like it. There are some things. I mean, I don't have this black and white rule of like, well, especially when it comes to esters, well, I just don't use any. It's not like that. It's just that I have a preference one way or the other. So DHB is one of those that I really do like, and I don't want it. I don't want to be wrong and then all of a sudden get blood markers that go, ooh.
Yeah, I was going to ask you too about liver, because we had a couple questions in the stream. One guy said, any truth about DHB raising liver enzymes? Has anyone seen this with themselves or their clients? And then we had somebody else ask, can DHB be made in organic solvents?
That last question, I don't know that. That's out of my wheelhouse. That one I don't know.
Like, is he saying, can you take equipoise and with the right chemistry set, convert it to DHB? Is that what he's asking?
No, I think he's saying so DHB is known as being a compound that can be very painful,
Yep.
And it's got to be brewed. I think that's where he's coming from. So DHB, guys, that's one thing we didn't cover. It can be a painful shot, and I think it could be really hit or miss. Like, I'm doing fine, then it's like, oh my God, I'm crippled, But,
I found that batch to batch.
Okay.
Well, maybe not batch to batch, seasonally, like large batches. If I get a bunch of it, I'm like, after the first few shots, I'm like, God, man, this really isn't that bad. The vast majority of it, I put it up there with Pro. Some people just don't respond very well to Pro, and you get that soreness. But I will tell you this: there is one thing that recently, I got a piece of advice from a brilliant prep coach for inflammation.
Oh, what I tell you? Oh,
exactly. It's obviously one of you two. I use BPC. I used to not be a big fan of it, for the injury, but I use it now daily for inflammation. And I got to tell you,
I've been doing it too, Andrew.
It's really, yeah. And I was gonna give him props. One of the main things I noticed right out of the gates is my injection soreness is minimal compared to what it used to be. Now, and let me say this just as an example. A lot of people don't do this. I hit my rectus femoris. Do you guys do that or no? Like inject it?
No.
Okay, I do.
Rarely, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that I use it like people would use their glutes, but it's a once a week hit. Like, it's a legit, if I have 4 sites that I hit routinely, I hit my rectus femoris. And I'm one of those who, if I hit the right side, I hit the left side. So if I have 6 mil to take, I'm not trying to put 6 mil in one syringe. But even if it's like 3 or 4 mil, let's just say 3, because obviously that's typical, barrel size. I still will cut that shot in half at 1.5, 1.5.
Yeah.
This comes from an old school, me injuring myself from hitting a ventral glute shot, and having one side be sore. I firmly believe that I caused one of my lower back herniations from having a tight glute, ventral glute, tight hip, and training legs. And because of my chronic history with lower back, I've been injury-free in my lower back for 9 years. But going through those chronic injuries, I will never hit one side over the other. It could even just be a shoulder. You think, but everything is systemic. So I don't want one side weaker, one side more sore than the other. I'm going to hit them both no matter what. And I noticed that the rectus femoris shots, those are typically more sore, to the point where without BPC, I can't even do a typical psoas stretch because my quad is so sore. And if I can't stretch my psoas, the back of my brain goes, you're going to blow, you're going to herniate a disc if you're not careful. So the BPC has helped to, daily, has helped to minimize that inflammation from injections. So I didn't have, it was hit or miss prior to the BPC, with DHB being, like me being sensitive to it, but I put it up there Pro. Some other people are like, no, it's far worse than Pro. But I think it just depends on the source, and it depends on the, the ratio of the BB and bacterial oil.
Let me ask you this, though. What if you're doing like let's say you're cruising and your total volume of like your shot is like, 0.4 cc's. Are you dividing that into 0.2 and doing each shoulder? Or are you okay? All right. I just want to clarify.
But when the volume is that small, I use insulin pens. I still go IM, but I still use insulin. I think that the deep injections of the 80s at 1.5. Does anybody use a 1.5 inch?
No, not anymore.
I mean, that is just so deep that even now, I'm like, I know I'm big enough, but I still would think I'd hit a bone. You know what I mean? You put it in your quad, you're like, I'm going to hit.
We used to all use them. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
It's all we used.
Yeah. And maybe it was because we were fatter. Oh, I always laugh and say that's like using a funnel. You might as well just put a funnel and pour it in because it's that thick. The only thing I do now is I do, because I have so much gear because I'm a drug abuser, that I use the 21s. The lowest I go is 21 because I will draw with 21s because it's just so much faster than trying to draw with the 23 and then switch it out.
All right. Guys, let's talk about intra-workout carbs and saving money. So like the past 10, 15 years, intra-workouts become super popular. It's a great way to support pre-workout insulin use. It's great for recovery, and it's great for endurance in those long workouts. Here's the thing. It's really expensive. It's not only expensive for us, it's expensive for supplement companies. They really don't make a lot of money off of it. That's where True Nutrition comes in. So True Nutrition, they're not only a retailer, they're also a manufacturer. They're actually making a lot of the products that you guys are already buying from other companies. So just think about it. You're going to cut out the middleman. The only thing you're going to miss out on is the fancy labels and the branding. Outside of that, you're getting the exact same high quality products, but you're getting it directly from the source. If you're going to pay for the price of highly branched cyclic dextrin, ensure that you're getting 25 grams per scoop, not of a mix of carbs, but just of highly branched cyclic dextrin. We can mix the other stuff in later, Use our code THINK, get some savings, plus it's like voting for us. It lets them know that you support what we're doing. What if we can rapid fire through a few of these? Probably not.
No.
But we do have a bunch of stuff, and we're going to try to get through what we can here, guys. And by the way, too, if you're new to our content, we'd love to have you subscribe. We have several bodybuilding podcasts that come out each week. The show comes out every Friday. And how about this one? When it comes to low carb wraps in a cut or prep with clients, do you guys count the carbs of the wrap? Do you take into account the fiber? And only count the net carbs?
I actually like
wraps
this
because
question.
there are no wraps.
Thank you. I was going to say, let's start with this question, because I don't want to be that anal guy, but I don't allow those things. I just don't. Me neither. And I wondered if you guys did or not.
No. And I mean, I remember 20 years ago doing a contest and trying to fit those in and just being like, I'm giving myself digestive issues because I'm trying to use 2 of them for my chicken meals, and then there's so much fiber in there, and you're like, it's not a positive experience. So I tell people we're not using those. Like, plain bodybuilding foods have worked for the test of time. And honestly, it's never been easier to diet. I say this all the time, with the amount of condiments that we have that are 0 calories or next to no calories, with things like the Ninja Creamy, with things like there's just so many things we have that, like, sorry, we're going to save the wraps for your off season. Okay.
Did you guys ever see that bread? There's like I can't remember what it is, but there's this bread that only has, like, they advertise it as low carb bread, and it's basically all fiber. I bought it and I was like, I'm going to give this a try. We'll see how it goes. I'm super regular, right? I got the worst constipation. I couldn't figure out why. I'm just eating like 4 slices of this bread every day. Everything's great except for the fact that I can't poop. And then it finally took like running out of the bread to figure out exactly what was going on. Maybe I tried it again. I'm like a month later. I couldn't like get around it. If I ate the bread 2 slices or more, constipation.
Yep.
I never get constipated, so there's that.
It might have been too much fiber for you, and then you needed more fluid in your colon. But
I tried, dude. Like I started like doubling up on my water. I was like, I'm gonna try to make this work. There's nothing I could do. It was just the worst.
I tend to point people away from all those high fiber substitute products, just because it's like the experience you said. That's like 85-90% of people. Yeah. So trying to fit a square into a round hole kind of thing.
All right, guys.
Okay, go ahead.
How about what are your thoughts on water loading into a contest, or just reducing water back. For instance, I heard Matt Jansen saying that he has his clients drink 7 liters of water and then we'll reduce to 5 and then to 4 before the show. I'm sure you have experimented with everything. What have you personally found with your clients and what works best? And I guarantee you that Matt doesn't like always do 7. And then
exactly.
5 and then 4.
When people say they heard this one thing that, oh, that's the holy grail. Like, it's like, no, that was what he did with one athlete that athlete posted on YouTube for their YouTube series that they were running into the Olympia. People understand, like, everyone is getting individual plans. If you're a good coach, you're getting individual plans. I mean, no one has a patent on chicken and rice prescribing that, but it's like, and it's odds are you're probably eating similar foods to the person next to you that's getting on stage. But the little details, that's the micromanaging that a good coach with their eye has. But in terms of, like, you know, there's a lot of things you can do with water, but let's say this. What if you have an athlete that a week out, they're drinking 7 liters of water every single day, whether you're feeding them high or you're feeding them low, they look dry as a bone. It would behoove you to start playing with that in that final week, because you've already established they look dry all the time. Just because of bodybuilding lore or what you're supposed to do in terms of pulling water, like, why would you do that at the expense of possibly hurting their look, making them look flatter? And in the case, actually making them look like they're not as dry as they really are, because I've seen that people do that too when they start to pull water. But water loading, yeah, I mean, I would say I probably do it half the time with people if I haven't established the previous example that I just talked about, you know, and if someone's baseline water intake is like 6 liters every day, yeah, bumping it up to something like 7 over the last 10 days. And then I don't like to pull water like Wednesday, Thursday. I'll usually wait until a little bit later to pull it. But the whole idea is that, you know, your body's going to excrete and flush what it doesn't need at that time. So you just get that constant cycle going. The key is, though, is like, I feel like you don't want to pull water too early, because you get to that point where now your body says, okay, I'm going to hold on to this water. And you create both a flat, but it almost looks spilled, even though the athlete isn't really spilled, but it's like a flat spilled look because you didn't keep that water flusher going, or you pulled the water too quickly. So yeah, I think it can be used properly, but again, I think you need to look at your athletes or yourself, and like, if I'm looking great 7 days out, no matter how much water I'm drinking and it's sky high, I'm going to ride that right through the show and just keep drinking right up until we get on stage almost.
That's pretty much the marker at one week out. I want to know what the client is taking. There's a kind of I don't want to give away too much. Not that there's secrets or anything, but still, you know, we give away enough free information that I'm not going to spoon feed. And it's not even about bodybuilders as far as competitors. I'm not going to spoon feed potential. Everybody's a trainer, so all of a sudden their protocols are going to change because, well, I heard this from Andrew, I heard this from Skip. So, but I do like it 1 week out. Let's find out it's basically remind me, what is your water intake at this point? Because I want it. I want those variables constant. It's the same thing with checking condiments and making sure that there's nothing in there. Have you, without telling me, gravitated toward, you know, you're drinking 7 diet sodas a day, or four Monster Zeros, where that amount of caffeine can really play into condition? And quite frankly, I'll use that as an example. Let's say you've been drinking 4 Monster Zeros. I happen to have one right here. Everybody thought it was Pabst Blue Ribbon, but it's actually a Monster Zero. And you're drinking 3 or 4 of them coming into the last week. You know what? Probably not going to change that, because I don't like changing variables that have been constant coming into the last week, unless they're just like, this is in the way. Like, what the hell were you thinking?
Yeah, like if they're not looking good, then you might be like, you know, maybe we need to change that.
Wait, can I give an example? Can I give an example of that?
Yeah.
Was in the athlete's showroom the day of the show, and you know, I'm like, okay, so we're going over meals for the day, and I'm like, so how are you cooking your eggs? And she goes, oh no, I just drink those every day. And it made me think back to like Skip's point months ago of like, if you don't explicitly say you got to cook your egg whites, don't assume that they're going to cook their egg whites. And that, I guess that was a me issue that I probably should have make sure you cook your egg whites. And because I was wondering, why was there some distension? Why is there, you know, always like, no matter what food we changed in or what we did with carbs or whatnot, always a little bit of distension. But so anyway, sorry, that was just an aside.
Did that fix it?
It was the day of the show.
Oh,
yeah. So it could have.
Could have, if we would have pulled it like
3
weeks out, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're talking small things, I'm sure,
Yeah. The other one is.
And at the last minute, those add up.
Yeah.
Well, the other one is if an athlete is cooking their rice all through prep, and then because they're traveling for the show, they start to rely on that Uncle Ben's microwavable rice, for instance, which has like that layer of like palm oil, and it also just has like it sits in your stomach differently, right? And they start wondering like, man, food's not going through me the right way, or I'm starting to look a little different than I normally do with rice. So I always tell people like, it's $30. Go buy a rice cooker at Walmart so you can cook your rice fresh constantly. Little things like that.
Yeah. Constant variables. I mean, when it comes down to the water intake, here's what I'll say, because I'll keep it brief, which is weird for me. There is no, I don't knock other things, whether it be water loading or not water loading. We all have that different methodology. And I don't think it's necessarily right versus wrong. It's whether that trainer knows that method and is well versed with it. I think it's no different than using, some people use diazide, some people will use hydrochlorothiazide. I mean, in the end, we're using that compound for a reason. And if that trainer is familiar with that method, then don't fight it. I wouldn't ask or insist on water loading any more than I would expect to that I would ask for, well, I'd rather use this different diuretic. If a trainer is familiar with a specific diuretic or a specific protocol, go with that. Don't fight them on it. That's what they have the most experience with.
Yeah. All right.
It's different from athlete to athlete too, right? Like no trainer should have the same peaking, loading water protocol for every single person in every single division. Mm-hmm. Obviously there's a basis of experience. Okay, if you've worked with 14 super heavyweights this year, odds are that you're going to probably be using a similar volume of food to fill those guys out, or a similar volume of water leading into the show before you start really micro tweaking stuff. But it really is those individual changes meal to meal in those last 2 to 3 days.
Absolutely. All right. Real kind of basic one here. Quick question. I believe this is from Patreon from Jake. He says, do you need a test base for Anavar? And would it be a good option for a first cycle for someone that doesn't want to have to hide their pins in sharps bin from their other half?
We're going back to this one where I won't go into that.
Yeah.
About the choices. But anyway, could you run Anavar on its own? Yes, you could. Will your results be as advantageous as if you ran a test base? More than likely not. Here's a misconception that sometimes, actually, I've heard quote unquote experts in hormones mix up that something like Anavar or nandrolone raise your testosterone levels. That's that. Like I remember hearing that guy, Dr. What's his name, Andrew Huberman, on Joe Rogan say when nandrolone increases your testosterone levels. What? And I'm like, I've never seen that happen in a million different labs I've looked at, including myself. What is this guy talking about? And so I lost all faith in that guy when he said that. I don't know if he just misspoke, but he didn't. He looked like he was committed to that.
You think he would say like androgen levels, or you know what I mean? Something like that.
Levels, exactly.
Yeah.
But the point being is that when you're taking a testosterone derivative such as Anavar, any of the other steroids you could possibly take, you are shutting down in some way, shape, or form your natural testosterone production. And in some cases, your natural testosterone can go really low if you're using, say, a high level of, say, Anavar. I haven't done this myself, but if you're doing like 100 mgs of Anavar a day, it'd be interesting to check your testosterone levels after 6 weeks of that, because I'm going to estimate that they're pretty low. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'm not going to recommend anybody take Anavar alone. And I know that this comes back to old school where we get the old head label and they've been doing this. They do the same thing that they've done since the 80s. But there's a reason for that. It's sensical. I'll just leave it. It's sensical. It makes sense. It all fits together. So if a client comes to me and says, hey, I just want to run an Anavar cycle and I have to hide pins from my wife, I'd actually encourage him to run testosterone with it or to get marriage counseling. because if you're not on the same page with your spouse and she's not supportive of you using gear, figure that out, because that's a marriage issue. And you know what? Some people aren't, and that's fine. But I come back to what I always say. If I had to hide my gear from my wife, and especially if kids are involved, that's a path you just don't want to go down, because if you're hiding things, your wife could be banging your trainer, and hope I'm not training him. Just saying.
Well, I guess I'd give the guy advice, like,
older.
why don't you go to a doctor and get a script for TRT? And that way you can be like, honey, it's a medication. I'm prescribed this. And then just hide the Anavar on the side.
I'm with you guys.
How many spouses are on board with that? As soon as the doctor says it's okay to say something, 3 guys on a podcast who've been doing it for decades, that just doesn't hold any water. But if you go to a general practitioner who has no idea about gear or anything else, they'll write you a script for it these days. Let her be on a GLP, and then that way you're both on something.
I did Anvar Only 2 times, and I did it with clients, and I did that recently. It's been within like the last, I'd say, 18 months. One case was a guy who just wanted to kind of dip his toes in, see what it was like. And we started out with 25 Anavar, and we ran that for, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks. And then we're like, okay, well, we can go to 50. And the caveat to it was, hey, listen, if you start feeling crappy, like if you start feeling like, just like I started explaining like signs of low estrogen or low testosterone, I was like, then let's pull it back. But he did really well with it. I think he went for like 6 weeks. He made some progress, and then, to be careful, I was like, let's be safe, man. Let's run a PCT. We'll keep it real short. And when he ran the PCT, he actually felt even better. So he felt great on the cycle, and then even better on the TR or on the PCT. And he continued to gain through the whole thing. So none of it was really big. I can't remember what he gained, but it wasn't much. The other guy is fairly young, like very young. And I worked with his dad, and he had said, listen, if you want to run gear, I want you to compete naturally first. And he worked with me and said, you can work with Scott. And so I worked with him on a show. He competed naturally. And then after that, he was allowed to cycle in the next off season. And I said, well, why don't we start with just Anvar Only? Check your test levels first, see where you're at. We'll see how you do. And by the end of 6 weeks, he did start to feel like his levels were dipping. So I would see it
affecting a younger kid more than an older guy in that situation.
Yeah, we pulled it out, and then from there we went to test. So in both cases, the guys made progress, but it's like the amount of effort we had to put in. I don't know. I'm with you. I think that going to test, because here's the only thing I'm thinking is, for somebody who is in a younger situation, Anavar Only is just, it's less of a commitment overall. We can stop it, and if you're doing 25 a day, we're probably not shutting you down that hard. You're probably not going to gain that much from it either. Was kind of the mindset behind that, and it just wasn't going to be a big commitment overall. And you get a little bit of an idea, but I think as far as making good progress goes, it in hindsight now, I don't think it was really of a huge value.
Well, let me add to this, add this. I feel like in the younger guy situation, the 25 to 50 mgs of Anavar was more of a placebo effect for gains. Like, I'm on something, I'm training harder, I'm eating all my meals, right? And then, but in reality, the net effect of androgens in his body was probably higher when he was natural than when adding in 50 mgs of Anavar, meaning it shut him down enough that the net anabolic action he had going on in his body was actually lower, and that caught up to him actually around that 6 week mark as he continued to shut down. And that placebo effect of like, I'm on gear, I got to train hard, I got to eat all my meals on time. Like, because
the scale did move like a first cycle type thing, not dramatically like it would have on a test cycle, but I mean he went from like gaining casually, making progress to getting spiked, with the same food.
Because I'm thinking back to the experiments they did with Dianabol, where they gave half the people 50 mgs and they gave the other half sugar pills, and the sugar pill people actually did better in terms of muscle mass gain and strength gains. or at least equal in some measurements, but better in some ways than the anabolic or the dianabol group, because of the effect of the placebo. And Scott Stevenson has talked about this numerous times in presentations and in his book
and on Muscle Minds.
Yeah, and on Muscle Minds. So I always keep thinking, I go back to that experiment when we talk about oral only cycles and the effect. Because if I know I'm taking something, I got to train hard. I'm on steroids now. I got to make sure I get all my meals to fuel this muscle growth, this anabolism that's happening in my body. You know what I mean?
It's possible.
Question for you, Scott. You touched on the one client using PCT.
Yeah.
Now, to clarify, was it true PCT or was he on HCG during the time he was using Anavar?
No, he wasn't.
Okay. The reason I bring that up is...
But that would be an option, I guess, if you wanted to support test levels, right?
Yeah,
yep.
Big difference there, because then you're fighting to keep that natural testosterone online that can actually benefit, especially if it's someone who's younger.
Yeah.
Benefit by adding the Anavar in. Now, you said PCT, so technically, by definition, PCT is post, not during. But
right.
HCG being one of... I'm still one of those people who believe... I don't like HCG unless it's someone who wants to run it during... So I'm not big on it as a post-contest therapy. I'm not big on PCT because I'm old school and we didn't have PCT and we didn't need it. So I don't like PCT anyway unless you already know you need it. Otherwise, you're taking drugs to counter drugs that you're already taking and you don't even know if you really need it. But that's just me.
It's 2024. You're either taking more drugs or less drugs.
Never
zero drugs.
Exactly.
There's no zero drugs. I like that. All right. How about this one from Casey? He says, what are some tips on bodybuilding with a job that requires flight and travel during the week, such as finding a gym and meals? It's a client of mine.
Yeah, those are always tough. But the people that succeed at it are some of the most driven, on top of their shit people out there. Because I find with clients that typically have careers that put them on the road 4 or 5 days a week, or 3 days out of the week, or 10 days out of the month, they're always getting started again.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm thinking of, do you guys know Chris Schaub?
Yeah.
He turned pro at North Americans. He won the 40.
Yeah, I was happy to see that too.
Yeah, but I bring that up because he's got a career that puts him on the road. Like, you'll see him in Massachusetts one day training with your buddy at some gym that they go to, and then you'll see him in Georgia the next day, and then you'll hear he's back at home in Florida. So he's got a job like that. So anyone that wants to find out exactly how to do it should reach out to him. But my advice to people is, I always tell them, with like these companies like Mega Fit Meals, have them delivered to your hotel room. So, and you got to schedule this out a little bit. So you got to know your travel schedule a few weeks in advance, but you can schedule, they'll deliver it right there. It's usually delivered by 11 o'clock the morning it's supposed to be there. Scout out the gyms beforehand, obviously. And hopefully, if you're traveling for work, you're on a route that you do typically several times a year. So you start to remember, okay, there's a powerhouse over here. This is kind of a crappy town, but at least there's a Planet Fitness, so I can go in and do something.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot more scouting out and a lot more planning. But I do think using a meal prep company is very advantageous for you.
And if you don't have a meal prep company, Whole Foods has 2 or 3 different types of chicken that is always cooked. You can buy it literally by the pound, 10 pounds at a time. They have cooked vegetables. They have cooked quinoa and rice. You can literally just go in, stock up, and then that way you don't have to worry about trying to prepare as much food in your hotel room as well.
Yeah.
UC Suma, Matt Marshall. He does a lot of travel for work. One time he even went to Korea, and it was for like 3 or 4 weeks. They don't have Mega Fit Meals there. You know what I told him ahead of time. I was like, listen, man, I don't think he was on like a hard prep or anything at the time. I was like, listen, man, if you're going to Korea, like you want to enjoy yourself. It was for work. I was like, you want to go off plan, man. I totally understand. It could be a once in a lifetime trip. He packed an additional suitcase with all of his meals, entire month's worth of food, all prepackaged and lined up in this suitcase, and flew with an additional bag. He did not miss a meal on that trip.
Wow. The only issue, though, is a lot of times these countries don't let you bring like even cooked
You have
meats.
to look ahead. Yeah.
So you got to make sure that it's a country that allows you to bring foods that aren't necessarily like in prepackaged bags
Yeah.
Just like you can't bring certain animals or plant life or whatnot, different species into different areas. So yeah, that's cool. Korea lets you do that.
They a lot of them will if it's cooked, but you never know who you're going to run into. I know that technically, so you're allowed to do that in Germany, but they caught Dusty at the border one year, and one of his tips was, he said, don't travel with an actual cooler. He was like, if you travel with a cooler, you're going to get attention. He said, put it in a suitcase. If you freeze it, and here's the thing, if you freeze your food if you put it in overnight, it's not going to be super frozen the next morning. But if you put it in 3 days in advance, it's going to be rock solid. It will travel for a whole day. But that was one of his tips, was he said, don't put it in a cooler because you'll get attention. People, they'll want to know, well, what's in your cooler versus a suitcase. You won't get as many eyes. And they took it. They took all of his food at the border.
That sucks.
And the story was, too, the guy was like, oh, hey, how's it going, man? Oh, you here for FIBO? And he's like, oh, yeah, you're a really big dude. And, he's talking to the guy as the belt's going around. And then he picks up his stuff and he's walking off and he goes, oh, hey, buddy, come back here. What's in the bag? Yeah, every freaking meal.
You should have said GH.
Yeah. How about supplements to help with post-surgery? He didn't say what type of surgery.
BPC 157 GH. What's that?
AAS GH. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean all the same things that help speed up cell division and recovery.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were asked about the our now famous test EQ NPP cycle. With Andrew's ratios, would you still need an AI with 600 test, 480 NPP and EQ and 200 NPP? He says, I'm trying to avoid an AI.
You don't know until you go and get your E2 checked a couple weeks into the cycle. So, I mean, we can guess and we can give educated opinions on it, but we've seen weird things, right? Where some people on that cycle, their E2 would be 8, and in other cases, someone's E2 might be 90. So, most people are going to fall somewhere in that 35 to 55 range, which I think is acceptable, and I wouldn't add an AI in, but you just don't know based on it's your individual chemistry, right?
So client comes to you and that's the cycle they want to run. I'm going to pose this question in a different way.
Yeah.
They come to you with the cycle and this is what they want to run. Do you put them on an AI or do you let it ride? See what maybe I'm already answering the question. let it ride and let them get into the cycle and see where the estrogen levels are.
Bingo, part 2. Yeah. I start the cycle and then I say, hey, in the next 2 weeks or after 2 weeks, one of these days, can you go and schedule, I even link it a lot of times, like LabCorp, this, Merrick Diagnostics, it's $18, right?
Yeah.
Go get it done. It's 10 minutes out of your life, and that way we have valuable knowledge going forward that with these rough ratios that we're talking about, just don't need it all. So I think it's worth it. Absolutely.
Just going to see what else we have in here. Anything like last parting words for this particular episode? We're going to record a couple here today, guys. Importance of potassium intake in controlling blood pressure, water retention, and muscle fullness. What is your experience and how much do you recommend? My experience is higher potassium helps a lot at negating water retention issues associated with GH use. And
insulin.
Crucial.
There's a rabbit hole that I was going to bring up to you guys prior.
That's an episode.
Oh yes, it is. Yep.
Yeah.
It can actually send you to the hospital if you're not careful, and you might have other things going on prior to a show and that sort of thing. And when I say that would be combining, as an example, combining hydrochlorothiazide with insulin while loading. And you're super depleted, and then all of a sudden you are massively cramping because your trainer told you not to use hydrochlorothiazide, and you used it anyway. That's a topic for a show down the. And I'm laughing not because it's funny, but because the question actually fit with the situation that I had only a handful of days ago. But anyway, huge with insulin, obviously with GH too. Dr. Kurt Haven Havens does talk a lot about potassium, and and I don't want to get this wrong. So if anybody who does follow him consistently, or even Kurt himself, will counter what I'm about to say, I'll stand corrected. But in short, he points out that humans have had much higher, our diets have been much higher in potassium in the past, over history, than they have recently. So the body actually needs a lot more potassium than the potassium that we take in dietarily or even supplementally. Obviously, the supplementation, OTC supplements are limited to 99 milligram, so per capsule or tablet. So it ends up that if you are trying to ramp up your potassium, it can seem like you're taking it a lot, and you need to be careful. This is one of those things that you do need to monitor, and you do need to ramp up incrementally. You can't all of a sudden just start adding 1,000 milligram of potassium a day and expect that things are going to be okay. We get into the heart rhythm and things like that when you start playing around with, maybe not playing around, but adjusting electrolytes like that. You need to be careful.
Well, I mean, the danger is that your potassium levels go too high and stop your heart, right? I mean, if someone's using potassium-sparing diuretics and loading with potassium, or just in some cases eating their normal potassium in their diet and pulling water, they're using a potassium-sparing diuretic, flushing sodium out. You can create a situation where the heart says enough. And there's been a few situations like that in our sport, unfortunately, over the last 20, 30 years. So.
Yeah.
And it should be noted too, well, I'll say it, you guys tell me if you agree or not. It is far more likely that you're going to be hypokalemic than hyperkalemic, though. That there are peaking situations, like you say, with potassium sparing diuretics and things like that, where it can happen. But coming off a show, if you're going to have problems, it usually will be a hypo situation. But pay extra, I can't say this enough, pay extra attention if you're using insulin and or GH when it comes to potassium and magnesium as well. Because typically if you're going to go, insulin will literally pull potassium from the bloodstream, pulls it intracellular, and then that you end up with lower blood levels. But it does the same thing with magnesium. So sometimes we focus too much on one electrolyte when they're all working synergistically together. It's the old adage of, well, you're having a cramp. Even soccer moms will tell you, eat a banana.
Yeah.
That's just such a rehearsed, antiquated thought, because though that might be the case, there are a lot of other things that play into that cascade of electrolyte balances, imbalances, what you're using that could put. I think a lot of people don't know that insulin can have that type of an impact on electrolytes.
I recommend reading the pamphlet that comes with it. It's wordy, but you can learn a lot from that pamphlet that comes with it on electrolytes.
Skip, what's your word of the day? And we got Don's in the green room. What is it?
Heuristic.
Okay.
And I'm a heuristic trainer. I feel. You
mean you're holistic? Is that what you're saying?
No, not holistic.
Oh,
heuristic. Heuristic. Now I'm trying to make sure I say it right. It's a kind of a trial by error. It's another way to look at it is if you are letting your clients, as an example, and this isn't as much of what I do, heuristic process or method, proceeding to a solution by trial and error or by rules that are only loosely defined. That's how I say, or why I say I'm more of a heuristic trainer. I don't rely as much on the studies, academia, even not saying it's bad, but I'm a trial and error guy. I have been from the start. Another definition is enabling someone to discover or learn something for themselves would be a heuristic approach. I'm trying too hard to say the U. It's heuristic.
I keep wanting to say holistic.
It's kind of like kind of like Cool Whip versus Cool Whip. It's
Heuristic Doctor.
The H does not come before the W, even though it's fun.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate everybody tuning in for this episode of Blood, Sweat, and Gear with coaches Skip Hill and Andrew Barry. Guys, go to bodyberry.com. You can reach out to Andrew there for coaching. Teamskip.com to reach out to Skip. You can hit me up at mcnallydiets@gmail.com. And, of course, thank you to truenutrition.com. Use our code THINK over there for some awesome carb powders. You get high-quality carbs for cheap prices if you want carbo load, or you can go with the Cadillac of Carbs, highly branched cyclic dextrin. We're brought to you by supplementsource.ca for Canadians. Great deals that change week to week. And thank you to everybody from Patreon. Guys, for another episode of Blood, Sweat, and Gear, we will see you soon.